I always tell founders, do what you say what you do. I heard a lot of founders when I was early in my process telling me, like, juice your numbers, right? Like, make the story really exciting for investors and you'll be really easy to raise. And I actually pushed against that and I went the opposite way. It actually was probably harder for me to raise in the beginning, but like one of our largest investors put 50K in their first check. And then since then they've written $3 million into the business and they invested 3 or 4 times, right? So I think that's what's really cool is like consistently doing what you say you're going to do really opens the aperture for existing investors to reinvest. And as we all know, it's much easier to get existing investors to reinvest than it is to go out and find new investors.
Welcome to There Is No Alternative, a podcast about entrepreneurship, where I talk to founders, investors, and experts in the consumer world. I'm Tina Bou-Saba, founder of CXT Investments, where I invest in consumer brands and technology. Today, we are joined by Griffin Spolansky, co-founder and CEO of Mezcla, a fast-growing protein bar brand. I love these bars. They have a permanent spot in my snack rotation. I've known Griffin for 5 years and have been consistently impressed by his drive and integrity. He says, the way you do one thing is the way you do everything else. I wholeheartedly agree. We have much to discuss. Welcome, Griffin, and thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Tina. Excited to be here.
Yay. Where are you today?
New York City.
Okay, awesome. Okay, well, let's get started with a warm-up question. Do you eat breakfast? And if so, what did you have for breakfast today?
Yeah. Well, I came back from Sweets and Snacks at late last night. I actually got in at 3 a.m. So this morning I did not eat breakfast. Typically, as of recent, I've been trying to eat a few eggs, just get some like lean protein in. And I try and eat that around like 9 or 10 a.m., but I don't do a great job with that, to be honest. Typically my first like real meal is around lunch.
Interesting. Okay. Do you participate in what might be called like wellness culture?
I don't know how to answer that exactly. I try and be very healthy. I don't know if I participate necessarily in like wellness culture, with a lot of the diets. Like I don't really prescribe any of those. But I just try and like be healthy and live by like first principles, if you will.
Totally. You're a young person. You have a lot of time to worry about, the saunas and the cold plunges and all the things, my generation, we have to be very focused on. So awesome. Okay. Well, I'm so excited to hear the story of Mezcla. Maybe you can start it off, for those who don't know, by just telling us a little bit about the brand and what it is.
For sure. So very quick backstory on the brand itself. And actually I'll first start with saying we're a protein treat. So we sit between like heavy, dense protein bars and light, but not functional snacks. Like we sit right in the middle. And the idea came about when I was actually in college. So I played lacrosse at the University of Virginia and I was surrounded by protein bars. But for me, I had such a bad experience with them because the flavors were boring. The textures were all the same. Like I was eating bars for pure function, but not for enjoyment. And then on the flip side, you had snacks that didn't have any function, but were enjoyable. But I just felt like they were empty calories. So for me, which by the way, there's nothing wrong with just empty calories, but for me, I wanted something in the middle. I wanted something easy to consume, easy to digest, with delicious flavors. Like I'm a big foodie from New York, and I really thought like flavor was missing in honestly in the snack category in general, but then also something that had functionality. So like that's how I thought about it. That's how I created it. And I actually met a lady from Mexico, and we started Mezcla together. It means mixture in Spanish. And it was all about the mixture of ingredients and flavors and textures. So that's a bit about the backstory. And obviously happy to expound any further.
Awesome. That's a helpful distinction. Protein snacks as opposed to protein bars. I understand what you mean. I feel like there's a lot out there that is like so dense, also so chemically that I think is like so gross. Okay. So would love to hear the story. So it all started when you were still in college, right?
Yeah. So I was in a social entrepreneurship class and I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. Like my dad, my grandfather, all my uncles are entrepreneurs. So I always knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. And I actually like started bottling and selling my grandmother's salad dressing when I was 14 years old.
Oh, that's great.
So like I always had that in my blood and I wanted to work in food. And I was in this class. I was listening to a lady named Coco Sotelo speak about a granola company that she had started. It was a small granola company. She was selling at farmers markets and she was like mixing ingredients from her hometown in Mexico into the granola. And after she finished presenting, I actually like ran outside of the class to chat with her. So I'm like, hey, look, I think what you're doing is really interesting. I think there's a space in bars for an opportunity. Like, sorry, I think there's an opportunity in bars. Like,
Mhm.
maybe let's go after it. And basically, I was like, look, let's have a meeting next week. Let me pitch you how I'm thinking about this, and we'll go from there. And one meeting turned into 3 meetings, turned into like us meeting 4 or 5 times a week for a year. And that's ultimately like what started the business.
And this is all when you're still a student.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm a senior. They call it fourth year Virginia. So fourth year Virginia, and I'm in class for 4 hours a day. I'm at the lacrosse facility for like 6 hours a day, which you would think should be flipped, but it wasn't. And then I'm at Coco's house with her family for probably like 3 hours or 4 hours a day as well. So my schedule is pretty packed.
Wow. Okay. So I want to talk a little bit more about the competitive athlete experience because I feel like that's super interesting. And there have been a handful of people that I've talked to on this podcast who also had like a strong background in competitive sports. What did that experience teach you or prepare you for when it came to being an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I would say my experience at UVA was probably the most important experience in terms of like how I've been shaped as an entrepreneur. I walked onto the team, so I went there. I actually transferred from Colgate. I went
Hmm.
to UVA with essentially no expectation. The good news for me is that there was a coaching change when I got to UVA. So the coach that was there for 20 or 30 years, maybe even longer, was transitioning out, and a new coach, Lars Tiffany, was transitioning in, and he actually held open tryouts that year. So I was basically working like the whole year at Colgate. I wasn't actually an athlete there. I was planning to walk on at Colgate if I didn't transfer. So I was training that whole year in hopes that I would play college lacrosse, whether it was at Colgate or somewhere else. I ended up transferring to UVA, got there, tried out for this team for about a month and a half. It was a really hard tryout and ultimately made it. And then over the course of the next 3 years, we went from being a top 20 team to number one in the nation. And I learned a lot about myself, but also a lot about how to build a team, how to build culture, how to build discipline. And for me, like that was the most invaluable experience because one, it taught me that nothing is impossible, right? Like walking onto one of the best teams in the nation was something that like really scared me, at least like going through the trial process. But then making it like made me realize that I can do it. And even if I didn't, right, like whatever, I failed, but at least I tried. So that's number one. Number two is like there's so much going on in a day. You're so busy. You have to be able to prioritize. And number three was like, you have to be accountable to yourself, accountable to your teammates. And we built that culture at Virginia. And that translated from us being number 21 in the nation when I got there to number one in the nation. So that's what I try and do with the team here is like, how do we make sure that we're all accountable? How do we make sure that we're all disciplined, right? And how do we make sure that we all like put our best foot forward? And even when things seem insurmountable, like we're going to go after it and we're going to try it.
I saw a speech that you gave about accountability and responsibility and ownership, and I was super impressed. And I feel like that team sports experience really reinforces that in a very, very unique way.
For sure. I mean, I think it's interesting, right? Like when you're on a field and you make a mistake, you don't pick up the ground ball, like, or you decide that like you're not going to go 100%.
Ugh.
Your teammates are the ones that suffer. And what's really cool about UVA was like there was very clear feedback. So for example, like, even in the weight room, I remember one time I like was kind of dogging one set and wasn't working really hard in the set, and my teammate called me out and was like, "Hey, you got to pick it up. Like you're not doing a good job." And that was the first time I'd ever been called out like that on a team setting. And to your point, like that's the way to build accountability. He wasn't saying it in a negative way. He was saying it in a positive way, trying to build me up. Like, hey, look, like if we're gonna win games, we all need to be in this together. And to your point, like if you're not playing a team sport, you don't get that as much. So I think that's really nice about playing a team sport and building that culture of accountability and like everyone needs to do a great job. That's the only way we win is something really important.
How do you think about what you learned from your coach as it relates to motivating your team at Mezcla?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think first and foremost is building like a team culture. For a little bit, I had the idea that like we should build a family culture, and actually I've really shifted away from that. I think what's very different about teams versus families is, you don't get cut from families, right? Like even if you're not doing well, right, or whatever, you're going through hard times in your life, like family is always there for you. And the difference with the team is like a team is there for you, but you have to carry your weight. So that's like the first big thing for me is, and I'm pushing that very hard right now, is like we are a team, we're not a family. And that means like we all need to contribute in some way. So like one thing that we did at Virginia is we had a depth chart And like every week you could go in and see where you were on the depth chart, which was like very anxiety inducing in some ways, but also like pushed everyone to like compete harder and do better. Um, so for me, the first thing I'm trying to push is like, we are a team. We all need to contribute. And the second piece is, right, like when people are not pulling their weight, I think it's really important that we call them out. That also means that someone can call me out, right? I think that's really important, that like two-way accountability. And it's not in a negative way, right? But a very positive way. Like, hey, look, like we know, like I know you can be doing better. Like, let's make sure we show it. And I want people to call me out too, right? Like if I, for example, am late to a meeting, or, you know, even a few weeks ago, actually, I canceled the meeting last minute and someone called me out and they're like, hey, like we shouldn't set the standard that we're going to cancel meetings last minute. So things like that to me are really important. And that's what I'm taking from my experience at UVA and also like imposing here at Mezcla. And the last thing I'll say too is like team building. I think it's really important that we get together a few times a year and like we actually establish true connection. It's so easy just to sit behind computers and like build a remote workplace, but having like that true connection, I think, is what really pushes people to work harder and like go the extra mile.
That's really interesting. I love the team framing, and I also agree with you. I personally really don't like the family framing in a business context for the reasons you mentioned. And also, I think sometimes it's like too much, right? As if everyone, like
Yeah,
people are going
yeah,
to bring their best self to work, but that doesn't mean that they need to bring their whole entire self every single day,
for
right?
sure. 100% agreed. I'm 100% with you.
That's great. Okay. So, do you think that the resilience and even like pain tolerance of being a competitive athlete is good preparation for being an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I think in a few ways. One, I think for taking criticism, even internal criticism, right? I think there are a lot of people that are not great at receiving feedback, and I'm used to just getting yelled at by a coach for my whole life, not just in college. So I think that's really important. Honestly, I look to hire athletes because they're really good at taking feedback. And number two is I've been said no to and been turned down now like thousands and thousands of times, whether it's like raising money, whether it's pitching into a retailer, whether it's trying to hire talent. And I think it's very easy to get bogged down in all of those no's. And I mean, even me, right? It happens sometimes. Like when you're on a string of, when you're trying to raise money and you're 4 months in, and you're just hearing no, 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 right? It can be like very dejecting. But at the same time, to your point, like I kind of have that muscle built and I understand that you just got to keep pushing through the nose to get to a yes. Same thing like it is in college sports or in high school sports or whatever
Mhm.
intramural sports. So I think, yes, it definitely helped train me. And that's again why I like athletes, because when we run into roadblocks, we don't shut down. Like I was watching something yesterday, right? It's very easy when you run to like negative situations to just shut down and be like, I can't do this, or this doesn't make sense. You know, we're done. Whereas I think for us, not just me, like our whole team, we run into roadblocks all the time. It's like, how do we get around or above those roadblocks, right? So yeah, I think there's a ton of correlation there.
That's so good. I feel like this mindset around resilience and grit and even being inoculated against no's is so important. And for me as a parent, it's something that I think a lot about with my kids, right? It's like,
Right.
take the no's, take the pain, because then you get more used to it and
For
it's not so
sure.
upsetting and painful. It's just like, it's again, it's like an inoculation. I think it's super important.
For sure. I completely agree. Which is why, I mean, this is a tangent, but I have an issue with just parents that like coddle their kids so much, because it's good for your kids to hear no, right? It's good for your kids to like not make a team, to get cut, all that kind of stuff. So, yes, I completely agree.
Yeah, totally, totally. Okay, so let's get back to the business. I could ask you a million questions about sports. Again, as a non athlete, I'm so impressed, and now I so appreciate like the time and the dedication, like in college, for example. It's amazing. So, but back to the business of Mezcla. So, those early days, like where did you start when you said, okay, let's commercialize this and take the spirit and the idea of and the early concept of the granola into creating the snacks? How did you even get going on that and finding the partners and all the things?
Yeah, it's a great question. So essentially the way it worked is it must have been like November of 2018. We had this idea. Me and Coco start meeting in her kitchen 3 or 4 nights a week, maybe even more, honestly, 4 or 5 nights a week, right? For 4 hours a night. And we're working on everything from protein bars to protein chips to granola, like literally everything. And what we're realizing, one, we started honing on protein bars pretty quickly. My perspective, and I didn't know what velocity was at the time, was just that like bars would move faster off of shelf and people could eat more bars in a week than they could eat like bags of granola. And for some reason, like we just weren't overly excited about chips. So like we really were pushing on the protein bar route. So what we were doing for call it like 3 or 4 months was just testing recipes and plugging them into nutrition calculators and basically seeing like what it spit out. And if it spit out something good, we would make the recipe. And our whole idea was like, let's make a bar where you can see the ingredients, where you can taste the ingredients, like where everything's not really mushed together, where it, looks and feels and tastes like real food because it is real food. So that was the idea. We're doing this for call it like 3 to 5 months or so. And right after we make the product for a week, it's good. For 2 weeks, it's good. And then it goes moldy week 3. Or it gets really hard week 6. Or we realize there's another issue, week 10. So I think like we were kind of just banging our heads into a wall trying to figure this out. And we were at one point we were just like, we don't know what to do because we can't figure out how to make a product that will actually last, 10 months to 12 months on shelf. And what we ended up doing was talking to a bunch of people in the industry, and we found someone who ultimately said, like, you need to work with a food scientist. That's the only way you're going to commercialize this. And that was a really big step for us. So what we did from there was we found a food scientist. That was spring of 2019. She was really helpful in like commercializing the product, or at least making it like manufacturer ready. And then from there, we found a manufacturing facility, and that's when things really started to kick off. So I'll pause there if there are any questions. Like that's kind of like the way we like started the whole process, if you will.
Mm-hmm. And where was the manufacturing facility, and like how did you convince them to work with you guys as, practically a brand new business?
Yeah, so at the time we didn't even have a manufacturing facility. We just had this food scientist. And then we started asking people in the industry and this food scientist if they knew a facility. Fortunately, the food scientist actually worked with a facility in the past, so she was able to connect us. And I had another warm connection there as well, so that was all very helpful. And then, yeah, to your point, I spent 4 months pitching them on this idea because, their minimum runs are 50,000 bars per flavor. They don't really want to take a chance on someone who needs to make 25,000 bars and may never produce again. It's just like so expensive to like roll a new product up, get it on your lines, trial it, do all that kind of stuff. So I spent 3 or 4 months like going down to the facility in person, pitching them my idea, walking through the business plan, pitching them on why me, like why am I the right person to actually start this business. So yeah, it was very intensive for sure. And that's why I graduated in May of 2019. I didn't actually launch the business until August of 2020. So I spent a little over a year, really figuring out like how to commercialize this, how to get this ready for market, how to fund this, all that kind of stuff.
How did it feel when presumably many of your classmates were going to normal jobs and you were
Hmm.
going to start a food company?
Yeah, I mean, in some ways it was scary. My parents, surprisingly, even though they come from like entrepreneurial backgrounds, were pretty against it. I actually had an offer for a full-time role working at a restaurant group, again, like also in food, and I was planning to start in like early September of 2019. And I told my parents in like mid-August that I was going to go after Mezcla full time. So they were like actually pretty disappointed, pretty frustrated with me. And I was actually living at home. I ended up living at home for a few years post college. And that was scary, right? Like all my friends were going and living with roommates and going out in the city. And for me, like I moved home. I actually moved to my grandmother's apartment, and I literally was like waking up, working on Mezcla for 16 hours, going to bed and doing the same thing, rinse and repeat, like 6 days out of the week. I on Shabbat I do not work at all, but 6 days out of the week, like that's what I was doing. And I did that for, a year and a half, 2 years, probably 2 years before we even hired one other person.
Okay. And so was that the point when you had actually produced the snacks and were in the process of getting them into consumers' hands? Like how did that all work?
Yeah, so from like September 2019 to August 2020, I was just doing like all of the back end work. So basically, like setting up the entity, figuring out the go to market plan, commercializing the product, figuring out the flavors, all that kind of stuff. August 2020, we launch. And going into that launch, I was able to raise a few $100,000. And fortunately, like I was able to raise it from friends and family and like just get a little bit of cash, which by the way, in CPG, a few $100,000 isn't much, but at least like a little bit to get my feet underneath me. I was paying myself $0 at the time, so that was also a little stressful. And I was just went out, started pitching retailers. My sister took a gap year, so she was actually helping me. And then I had one of my friends helping very part-time on a commission-only basis, pitching to small retailers in Boston. So like basically the way we launched is, push really heavily online and let's go into a bunch of small retailers and try and grow that way.
What was the early feedback that you got from those retailers?
A lot of people love the product. I will say we had one initial run where we over roasted chickpeas, and this was like our first run ever. And the chickpeas were so over roasted, it felt like when you bit down on them, you were gonna like break your tooth or something. So I was freaking out. I'm like, oh, we just made 100,000 bars. We don't have that much money in our bank account. What are we gonna do? Fortunately, we sold through all of them, and we heard a lot of complaints. But the thing is, people actually love the product overall, and that's what we were hearing from retailers as well. So that enabled us to like make small changes and tweaks, but also keep moving forward and improve on the things we need to improve on. So we were hearing good feedback overall.
Hmm. When did you start to think maybe we're really on to something? Like this is working.
I'm still figuring it out, honestly. I don't think anyone ever really knows, but I think what's been really cool is we've doubled growth year over year. And like every time we're getting to a new stage, like we're just hearing consumers rave about the product. So I think that is really exciting. I mean, maybe like the first time I thought, oh, we're onto something is when I had friends and family telling me like, I'm actually eating this product. I'm like not just ordering it because I like you and because you're my friend or my family member, but like I'm actually eating this product and I love it. And I'd walk into rooms and people would be eating the bars. Like to me, I think that was pretty early validation that we were onto something because always family's going to support, friends are going to support, but they're not going to like actually consume or like use the product, depending on if it's food or beauty or something else, unless they really love it. And to me, that was really cool to see them actually really loving the product.
Hmm. So tell me about fundraising. You raised an early friends and family type of funding, and then what came next?
Yeah, so we raised for like a year. So we raised from call it like September of 2019 to August, to actually more like December of 2020. We ended up raising 400K in that early call it like pre-seed round. From there, then I found more angels who I thought could be helpful for the business, and we raised about $1 million. Then we raised a very small venture round, like $2 million or so. And we got some what was really interesting about that round is we got some great VCs in early on, but for very small checks. Then we raised a larger $5 million round, and then we raised a $10 million round. And what was really cool is some investors, actually two of our largest investors, got in for very small checks in that $2 million round, and they wrote checks again in that $5 million round. So I think that's really interesting.
That's fantastic. I think that this category is really competitive. It's capital intensive, but I think you all have built a business in a really thoughtful way, not over raising, but just and getting strong investor support. So I mean, congrats on that.
Thank you. Yeah, it's cool. And I think what's really cool, and this is what I always tell founders as well, and you mentioned it early on in the podcast, is like do what you say what you do. And I heard a lot of early founders when I was early in my process telling me like juice your numbers, right? Like make the story really exciting for investors and it'll be really easy to raise. And I actually pushed against that and I went the opposite way. It actually was probably harder for me to raise in the beginning. But like I mentioned, I mean, one of our largest investors put 50K in their first check. And then since then they've written $3 million into the business. One of our other investors put 250 in and now they've written $5 million into the business, right? So like I think and they invested 3 or 4 times, right? So I think that's what's really cool is like consistently doing what you say you're going to do really opens the aperture for existing investors to reinvest. And as we all know, like it's much easier to get existing investors to reinvest than it is to go out and find new investors. I think both are important.
Definitely. As an investor, one of the things that I appreciate about what you're saying is like, I think this is certainly the case in the consumer products world and beyond, but like execution is so hard and you can have the best idea, but can you execute day in and day out every single day? And
Exactly.
when you're close to a business, whether as an angel investor or a small early check, however it is, you are getting a front row seat to seeing the team execute. And like that in itself can create so much confidence for subsequent financings because you have at least significantly reduced the chance that the thing falls apart because of
For
poor
sure.
execution.
For sure. Completely agreed.
Really, really interesting. So, talk about your advisors. You've been really thoughtful with who you've brought around the table from early on.
Yeah. So the way I tried to build it is I always wanted to bring on advisors who were like 2 or 3 steps ahead of us. So when we we're a pre-seed company, right? Like my goal was to bring on advisors who were doing $3 million to $10 million in revenue. When we were a company doing $5 million in revenue, I wanted to bring on advisors who did, 20 to 50. And as we continue to scale, I've kind of tried to like basically think about our advisors like, are they 3 steps ahead of us, right? And that's what I've done. And I think it's worked out really well for us, because the issue is when you're a pre-seed brand, the CEO of a billion-dollar company, like they can't really resonate with the issues that you're dealing with. A $3 to $5 million founder, a revenue founder like Cat, right? So that's kind of how I've always thought about it. And honestly, it's worked out really well for us. Now I think when you get to a certain stage, and I could be wrong, right? I'm still learning. Once you get to a certain stage, I think there's a little bit of diminishing return from advisors because you have the capital to hire really strong people in those seats. And obviously you're giving up equity to advisors. So you have to be really thoughtful and picky, especially as you get bigger, but always, right? Like you don't want to give up too much equity at first. But at the same time, I've seen the flip side where people don't want to take on any advisors and they crash and burn because they don't want to lose some of their equity, which I think is the wrong approach also.
One thing that I've seen is when you can hire really talented, experienced people, you are less reliant on that particular set of skills and experiences from advisors. But I have seen founders, CEOs like yourself look to like advisors and mentors for other things, especially around almost like executive leadership. Do you know what I mean? And like just dealing
For
with the
sure.
challenges that come that are not so much in the business, it's more like on the business.
For sure. I mean, yeah, we have some great advisors now. The COO of Farmer's Dog,
Wow.
Fed Moishan, he's amazing. Steve Platt is incredible. He was the ex-CEO of Icelandic Provisions, and then he was at Bright Farms. And I meet with Steve literally like every 2 weeks. And to your point, we're focusing on everything, but we're also focusing on my leadership as well. How I focus on growing the business. So I think that's really helpful. It's less maybe like in the weeds tactical. We have to do this on the sales front, and more so big picture. Like, how do we think about growing this business? So yes, I do think there's a really important place for that as well.
Yep. So tell us about the business today, like doors, products, where is it at?
Yeah, so we're in over 10,000 doors today. Scaled from natural now into conventional, club, mass. We have 9 different flavors. We're working on innovation right now. We have different pack sizes, so we have everything from singles to multi-packs to variety packs to trial packs. And yeah, the business is thriving. I think for us, the big goal is like, how do we keep working to 100 million, 150 million in sales? And that's what everyone's really running towards at the business right now.
That's awesome. How do bars stand out on shelf? It's such a crowded category. What have you learned on that?
Yeah, I mean, my perspective is like you look at the category 15 years ago and there were just energy bars, like that's all it was. Now there are 500 different kinds of bars. You have high protein bars, you have organic bars, you have, energy/fuel bars, you have, creatine bars. There's really everything. Plant-based bars. So like I would say there are a lot of different subsets. The way I still think about it is like you have high protein bars, you have pure snack bars, and you have those bars in the middle, and that's really where we sit. So think about like IQ Bar, Aloha, Go Macro, Magic Spoon, us, and that's really like how I segmented it. Because if you think about like the 20 different segments you can segment it into, I think it becomes a little bit too segmented, honestly. So for me, like it's just like those 3 options, and that's how I kind of tear it out of my head. And then to your point, like how do we stand out? I mean, it's very hard. I think there are a few things. One is just operational execution. Like we need to execute at a really high level. I think if we can do that day in and day out, we will beat out a lot of companies, right? If the product is consistent, if we deliver on time and in full, if we say we do and we do what we say we're going to do with retailers, right? They're going to trust us. So I think just operating at a very high level, first and foremost, is extremely important. And that is a way to stand out. And it doesn't sound like a moat, but it's really, really important. Number 2 is like, can you stand on texture? Can you stand on flavor? But the truth is in CPG in general, there's no like true IP for the most part, right? Like anyone can copy anyone. So in the end of the day, in my opinion, it boils down to how you operate. How do you think about margin structure? How do you think about raising capital, right? Like all that kind of stuff boils down to the true moat. And I think the true moat is people. And that's honestly what we're winning on.
That's really interesting. I hear you on execution. I think that execution in consumer products is extraordinarily difficult, right? And once you're layering in, especially for you guys, obviously depends on how things are packed, but there's just a huge volume of small things that are like flowing
For
through the
sure.
system, and getting that all right is underappreciated, but is crucially important. And that's what I think, you tell me, but I think that's what also makes retailers and buyers excited to work with you guys.
For sure. But well, okay, I'll say the hard thing too is it was easier when the team was smaller because I had a lot more oversight. As the team gets bigger, which I think is important that we hire people and we put them in specific functions, right? Like we need more specialists in certain areas, but also as the team gets bigger, I have less control over certain things as well. So I think it's really important that you hire the right people because hiring the wrong people can be so costly too.
Mm-hmm. What's your team like today? How many people? How is it kind of spread out?
Yeah, so I've intentionally tried to hire slowly. We're about 12 people right now, spread between finance, sales, ops, and marketing. We do plan to add about 3 people pretty shortly, but yeah, I think over hiring is something I've generally tried to avoid. But I think there's a happy medium. Like under hiring creates a lot of issues and probably stunts growth. Over hiring, I think also probably does the same. So there is that happy medium, that balance you need to find.
That's really impressive. That's a lean team for given how far you scaled the business.
Yeah, definitely lean, but we have great operators. So
Yeah. Talk about sales. What have you learned about sales as a co-founder, CEO in this category?
yeah, when you say sales, do you mean like the sale process, like the selling and
Well,
process?
good question. So what I'm getting at is I feel like as a leader in this category, in consumer, you're kind of like always selling, whether you're selling, to buyers,
For
selling to
sure.
try to convince someone to join the team. But that's not a skill that you learn in college. Like that's right. At least I don't think so. So I'm curious, how have you learned about that? Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. First of all, to your point, you're always selling, right? Like I'm selling myself now, right?
Yeah.
So you're always selling. You're selling to investors, you're selling to buyers, you're selling to potential employees. Um, so all the time, yes. I think it's just a muscle you need to strengthen over time. And I had not strengthened that muscle at all going into the business. So there was a lot I needed to learn. And I think it's just like anything, right? Like people have a fear of missing out. People want what they can't have. People also want to trust whoever they're being sold from, right? So like I think all of those things play into it, but I'm still learning. I'm still getting better at it, and I would say it's just a muscle I'm continuing to build.
Mm-hmm.
To me, like I feel like, and I could be wrong, but I feel like I'm a pretty personal guy, so it comes a little naturally to me. But still, there was a very steep learning curve at first, where even in investor meetings I would answer investors like the minute they emailed me, and I was very eager to get things done. And what I realized pretty quickly was like you don't want to be over eager either because that's also like potentially a red flag as well. So like there are little things like that I've learned over time, and I think that's helped me a lot. But again, like I'm still learning a ton.
Yeah, well, that's great though. That's great. Now, what is Mezcla's most popular flavor and what's your favorite?
Yeah, so there are a few flavors that are doing really well right now. It's like pistachio is having a moment, obviously. Um, Blueberry is a fantastic flavor. Obviously, the stay-at-home peanut butter flavor is a great flavor. Um, we are launching a few new flavors right now, exclusively with Whole Foods actually, that I'm really excited about. And I will say our chocolate pretzel and our salted caramel chocolate are 2 flavors that I am absolutely in love with right now. So I would definitely urge people to try those flavors for sure.
Okay, that's amazing. See, for me, I feel that the most perfect combination of foods ever invented is
Hmm.
always chocolate and peanut butter. So I compare everything else that I eat, always had to like, is it better or worse than chocolate and peanut butter? I really like the matcha bar that you guys have. It's different.
Yeah, I mean that was one of the first SKUs that we ever created. I was really excited about that one because I've loved matcha for a long time, and I always was surprised that there was like no matcha in any bars that I was eating. And again, going back to my initial thought on why I want to start the brand, I wanted to infuse exciting, unique flavors into the category, and to me, like matcha vanilla seemed like a pretty obvious one. So I love that flavor, and consumers also love that flavor as well.
That's awesome. So, how do you, as an entrepreneur, stay recharged and energized? You've got a million demands on you every day. What do you do to stay focused and energized?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, post college, COVID hit pretty quickly, and everything shut down. I actually started playing tennis because the weather was turning. It was in March, obviously, when COVID hit. So I started playing tennis outdoors, and I fell in love really quickly. So now I'm probably playing tennis like 3 to 4 times a week. That's a really good way for me just to like recharge and not think about work and just like focus on what's happening in the moment. And I would say like for me, that is as the biggest thing that I do to just like relax, get my mind off of work and really like recharge for what's to come. I will say too, I love going out to dinner. Like I'm a huge foodie, and I go to dinner with my family quite often in the city, and it's a good way just like to connect with the family, not be on our phones, not be thinking about work, and really just like be with the people that we're with. And then the last thing I'll say too is like Shabbat, right? On Shabbat, I don't answer work emails. I don't take work calls, right? I really just get to like relax and recharge, and that sets me up really well for the week. So those are a few things that I do.
That's great. So what are some of your favorite spots in New York City?
Ooh, I would say I love sushi. So Sushi Yasuda in Midtown is incredible. Um, I grew up in New York, so I've been going there for a long time, and it feels very homey to me. But that is definitely one of my favorite places. And it's nice too. Like a lot of these high-end sushi places, like you have to spend so much money, order like omakase. Here you can go and you don't have to spend a ton of money, order a la carte. It's great. And again, like I know the people there really well, so I love that place. I would highly recommend that place.
And on your tennis point, so what do you think about pickleball?
uh, yeah, I think it's cool. My girlfriend beats me in pickleball. I don't really play, so I don't love it because of that. But outside of that, it's not bad. I know there's a big feud between like tennis and pickleball players. Um, the noise is a little bit annoying for me, but it's fine.
Totally, totally. Okay, so last topic I would love to talk to you about with you is how do you think about the trade-off between growth and profitability for your company?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think it's always a conversation, and a lot of it just depends on how much cash runway you have in the bank and the appetite you and your investors have for growth. Obviously, in some ways, there's an inverse relationship between the two. Like, if you want to invest more, you should grow faster, but also, profitability may be lower for that month or that quarter or that year, whatever it is. So the way I think about it is, until you really have enough money to be very aggressive, like you just have to be really thoughtful. Okay, let me rephrase. You always have to be really thoughtful and really smart. Also, margins are the most important. So, like, in my opinion, if your margin is bad from the beginning, you're already doomed. So you have to have a good
Mhm.
margin from the get. After that, then you can start to pull the levers. Before that, you can't, right? So, like, let's say margin's good, then you can pull the levers. And it's really just a dynamic conversation, right? Like, what do you want to do this quarter? What do you want to do this year? Do you think you can be more aggressive? Like, is there a very clear place you can put dollars where you put $1 in, you get $3 out, for example? So like I just think being very thoughtful and strategic about it is important. And again, like I wouldn't turn the growth engine on until margins are in a good place, because if they're not, like you're always going to be chasing profitability, and I think it's gonna be very hard to get there.
Yeah, I think that that's great advice. And I've seen this a lot. It reminds me in the beauty category at Olive and June, where I was an early investor, which sold a couple of years ago, had a great outcome. One of the things that I think the company did so well is they were hyper focused on margins from very early on. And like your category, it was largely like nail polish, so relatively low dollar value items.
Right.
So again, you have this huge volume of stuff flowing through the system. You know what I mean? And so the margins, it's like super, super important to get it right. And they did a great job on that. And I really appreciate your saying that, because I think it is like crucially important. If you don't have that locked in, it's like almost impossible to make money, which is ultimately how you're going to capture value in consumer.
For sure. It's like, oh, we have a 20% margin now, but if we get to $50 million, we'll have a 50% margin. If there's a clear path, great. But if you're just making that up and you believe that to be the case, I would very much advise against pushing the
Yeah,
growth lever.
I totally agree with you. Absolutely. Okay. How do you see the business over, say, the next 5 years?
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, it's just continuing to put out really good products that resonates with consumers, continuing to hire really good people, and continuing to execute. Like, to me, those are the three things that are really important, and I think the rest will flow from there.
Amazing. Love it. Awesome. Thank you so much, Griffin. Really fun to talk to you today. I appreciate your making the time.
Of course, likewise, Tina. Nice chatting.
Thank you. If you liked this episode, find more on Spotify and follow There Is No Alternative on Instagram and YouTube, where we share clips from our conversations.